Well, 2015 started kind of shaky for me. In March of 2015, I took a fall, and so I was out of commission for about 6 months during the first part of the year. I tore a patella tendon in my left knee. I had to be moved about with a wheelchair and a van service to bring me back and forth for different meetings and appointments. So my year personally did not start off too well. I think we did very well in our budget process. We had over a $78 million budget. I think that the council was very well in handling those dollars. We were able to fill some gaps that previous budgets we had to eliminate staff. We were able to bring those staff back on board. We were able to do some capital spending, trucks, equipment with Sheriff Gamble and his people. They needed some more equipment, vests, weapons, vehicles. So we were able to bring ourselves back up to a functioning point where we had to do some drastic cuts in previous budgets because we just didn't have the dollars to support it. So I think we did a good job at that. I think we looked over the budget, looked at those departments that had been cut, that were running shorthanded, and were able to fill some of those gaps in. Scott Patterson, State's Attorney's Office, he's been running shorthanded. We were able to help him out and bring on another State's Attorney. I don't think he's brought that person on board as of yet, but the funding is there for him to do that when he's ready. Yeah. So we try to look at the entire county and see where we were running light and where we needed to plug some holes up. So we were able to do that in this budget. So I think that's a highlight that I take out of the first part of 2015. History is the good, bad, and the ugly. It is what it is, and let's not distort it. Let's not sugarcoat it. Tell it as it happened. Let's learn from it, and let's hopefully, as a people, not repeat the mistakes of the past. That courthouse had a lot going on back in the 1800s. There was a slave market right there on the corner of that courthouse, I believe, on Dover and Washington, or West Street. That corner, that intersection there, was a well-known slave market right there. So a lot of history there at the courthouse. The statue, again, this May 2016 will be 100 years for the Talbot boy statue. We don't know individually why each one of these boys decided to go off and fight for the Confederacy. Some may have fought because, hey, the boy next door was going to fight, so I'm going to fight too, and there you go. Were they going off to fight for the protection or the preservation of slavery? We don't know, but I would say by and large they were probably young boys who felt that they had something to protect, a way of life to protect, and I felt the conversations were civil in tone. I felt that the conversations were from the heart. The comments were from the heart, and to some degree I felt they were constructive comments. They looked to me as president of the council to speak for the council. And I told them that I would after we went back and we met in our administrative function, which the council is allowed to do. As you know, there are deliberations that we can have in administratively, as well as conversation we have at an executive function. So this was done during our administrative deliberations about the statute and what we should do. And members of the council looked to me and said, well, Corey, why don't you deliver the statement? Yeah. And so, yeah. Well, the comprehensive plan really has been worked on since 2015 by the Planning Commission. So it's been out there for over a year in various forms. I mean, the Planning Commission had their meetings on the comprehensive plan. I don't know how many people attended, but they did have their meetings on it. The council got their recommendations in February, I believe, of 2015. Okay. So it's been out there for a while. So for folks to say it was rushed, it was done too quickly, it's been in some form publicly discussed since early part of last year by the Planning Commission. Council got it sometime early part of 15, I believe February of 15. And then we started doing a look at the recommendations from the Planning Commission of the comprehensive plan. the council looked at some of the language, made some changes that they wanted to see in the comprehensive plan, and then we had a series of public work sessions where we went through those changes.
Right.
The matrix that was formed, I would say anecdotally, just guessing, about 80% of that we had agreement with the Planning Commission on those changes. So there's still about a good 10%, maybe 5% that we're looking to work through. Chapter 4, dealing with affordable workforce housing, there was some language that the council and probably me in particular wanted to really focus on how we can address the affordable housing question. If you remember, you go back and play my tape from 2 years ago, affordable housing was one of the things that I ran on. Affordable workforce housing, let me add that in there, was one of the things that I ran on because I was hearing from our workforce sector, our teachers and our custodians at the schools and at the hospitals, and some of our law enforcement people, our volunteer fire people who protect us and serve us, that they were finding difficulty with finding affordable housing here in Talbot County. So it was one of the issues that I took up to say, how can we can look at affordable housing, affordable workforce housing. It was in the 2005 comprehensive plan just as affordable housing. We wanted to focus more on affordable workforce housing, so we added some additional language that kind of talks about looking at different ways of making affordable workforce housing available. And the one thing about the comprehensive plan is that it is a guide, it's not an ordinance. It has to be enacted by council, so it has to be voted on. But in its form, it's a guide. It's not legislation, it's not policy per se. It directs policy, but it's a guide. And when you look at your comprehensive plan and your zoning ordinance, there should be consensus that it shouldn't line up. So if for an example, the villages, if the comprehensive plan says that you're going to have 3 village designations, a VC, which is a village center, a VR, which is a village residential, and a VH, which is a village hamlet, and sets the design for what makes one different than the other. You know, size, use, commercial use. There's also a table of use that's not in the comprehensive plan. So you have to go over to the zoning part of the ordinance and actually look at the table of uses to see what can take place in the VC. You're not going to find it in the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan just lays out, this is a VC, this is a VR, and this is a VH. You have to now go into another document to say what you can do in those particular areas. So it's a guide. Yeah, if you just look at infill alone, you're going to have some growth in your villages. What the comprehensive plan is trying to do is say that if you're going to, first of all, let's clear up some of the village boundaries, because some of the boundaries, like Longwood, was just like it was like a spider web. If you go back and look at Longwood's, it stretched way off of 662 into wooded areas and into pasture areas. But all of your homes in Longwood run right along, 662. So why is the village so spread out? So one of the things we wanted to do is to really bring those lines back in of some of those villages which had spilled over the years. That's the first thing, bring the lines in. Then when you do bring the lines in, and you talk about the infill lots, you talk about where do you want to see growth within that village. Do you want to see it sprawled out on the outer edges, or do you want to see it within the main corridor, maybe a couple, half a mile or half acre offside that major corridor, but to keep the village somewhat contained within a major thoroughfare. There's not a lot of access roads running through a lot of our villages, so your main Bellevue Road, Unionville Road, Longwoods Road, those main roads are what you have as far as traversing through those villages. So that's where we wanted to try to do, is bring the lines in, kind of village plan where you want those that growth pattern to go along those major strips. It's a process, yeah. I again go back into chapter 4 about affordable workforce housing, and there was some concern over how that can be managed. We may have to look at that again and see if that can be ironed out a bit more. There was some concern over village planning areas and what does that mean? Village boundaries have to be looked at through the tier maps. So there's still yet some work to be done. I don't know whether there's sticking points or whether just work that needs to be ironed out a bit better so that we can get a plan that both the council is comfortable with and the planning commission is comfortable with, so that we can now move on to the other things that are now being held up because we can't get the comprehensive plan done. We do have a map ordinance that we have to get done. We have the zoning ordinance we have to get done. We have a comprehensive water and sewer ordinance we have to get done. So, but those things we can't move to those things until we get the frame, the guide done. This is the guide, as I said. We'll just keep on working until we're ready, and if we're ready come the end of February, 1st of March, we'll vote then. It has to be introduced, of course, first, and then it has to go through a public hearing process. There may be amendments added that has to be considered. So.
So we're not done.
We're not done yet. I think we're close. Again, the majority of what the council put down into what you call the red line version of the comprehensive plan was looked at previously by the planning commission through that matrix process we went through, and pretty much I would say, just looking at it anecdotally, about 80% was agreed with. So we still have about a good 10 to 15% that we have to go ahead and iron out. And I'm comfortable that we can get that done. We need to work and get it done, and I think that's what we're elected to do. That's what the Planning Commission as an advisory body is there to do. That's what Mary Kay Verdery and Martin Kolick is there as our planning staff to do, is to get this done. So, and we're going to get it done. As long as I'm on the council and president, we're going to get it done. We'll sit down with them and go back and look over the comments from the December 7th focus group and the December 14th community comment session and go through those with them. And then at the end of the day, if we're ready to introduce a document, then we'll introduce a document. If we're not ready, then we'll go back and sit down again. And even in the comprehensive plan process, if you look at the 2005 comprehensive plan, there were things in that plan that were not adequate that you had to change. We did not have a 600,000 gallon wastewater treatment plant that we do have now, that has debt service on it. We now have the capability of bringing sewer to our western villages that we didn't have prior to 2005. So that's just changing the way we do business. It's changing the way that the county will look. But it's not going to be an overnight. It's not going to be you go to sleep tomorrow and you wake up the next day and you got a whole new Bellevue. Things take time. And again, you brought 1305 up. I think having that discussion allowed us to have a better piece of legislation, that still accomplishes what it was intended to do, and it just tighten some things in. I think at the end of the day, that's what we're going to have with the comprehensive plan, honestly, in my opinion. At the end of the day, it's going to tighten some language in, some language up, but it's going to still allow for those infill and for those villages to have a moderate level of growth with sewer now being available in those villages. It's going to allow some sustainable growth in some areas of the county. Everybody doesn't want to live as wonderful as Easton is. Every fireman can't live in Easton. Yeah. We got an email from St. Michael's about 2 weeks ago about having enough firemen to get out and answer calls. I'm going to show up and say that the council could have probably been a bit better in explaining the process and laying it out and mapping it out, if you would. So if any finger needs to be pointed, quite frankly at us. you know, and I sat down with our planning director, Mary Kay Verdi, and said, you know, we need to come up with a map. And if you remember the last public meeting on the 14th, Martin showed basically a flow chart of where we want to go to next.
Yeah.
Because I want people to see that we do have other things lined up that we need to get to. This is one piece of a 5-piece puzzle.